And because people are interested in their cosmetic appearance, that informs their workout choices. If you look at orthopedic surgeons are busier now than they've ever been. Who are they working on? Not couch potatoes. They're working on all these supposedly fit, active people, and because they train wrong and they don't get these compensation patterns out of their body, when they go to do these activities, they're making themselves worse and they end up getting injured, and that's why they end up having the surgeries. And I realized one day that my muscles, all my muscles, and the reason I was so strong was built on all this rage and hate and insecurities from childhood, from me being a little black kid who didn't get the right respect in Connecticut from people, from me not getting the right acknowledgement in sports and all this.
Hey everybody, it's Seano McFarland. If you're enjoying the Seano Show, TR giving me love already. Make sure to follow, subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. New episodes drop weekly. Don't miss out. Today on the Seano Show, I'm joined by one of the most respected names in the game when it comes to elite performance, physical, mental, and spiritual. You like that, TR? TR Goodman, he's not a trainer. This brother's a force, all right? He's the founder of Pro Camp, where world-class athletes, actors, CEOs, and warriors of every stripe come to sharpen their bodies and their minds. But what makes my brother TR a true giant in the space just isn't his methods, it's his mission. He sees potential most people miss. He trains your mindset as hard as your muscle. He builds champions from the inside out. TR's worked with the best in the world and he's helped them go even higher. Today we're talking discipline, spiritual stamina, recovery, peak performance, and what it takes to really become unshakable. Brother, welcome to the, you like that?
Thank you for inviting me.
We're gonna help a lot of folks out today.
That's the goal.
That's what we do here, right,
yeah,
brother?
That's right. That's
okay,
the goal.
This is so good. But he told, you're from Connecticut. Let's go on your backstory a little bit.
Okay.
Okay, let's talk about growing up a little bit.
I grew up in Suffield. We were one of the only black families there, and I went to Suffield Academy to prep school, and then after that, went on to college at Trinity, which is, if it wasn't for sports, I probably wouldn't have gone to play.
Before we talk about Trinity, we got to talk about growing up, brother.
Okay, all right.
I mean, you said, there was a cross out in front of your lawn one day.
Yeah, when my parents first bought our house, they burned a cross on the house, and of course I wasn't born at the time, but hearing those stories, and my mother was originally from Connecticut, my dad was from New York and the Bronx, and actually the first exposure to racism he really got was when he moved to Connecticut.
He's from the Bronx. He was a postman in the Bronx?
He was a postman in the Bronx. Right. He had a mail route that he delivered, and they wouldn't let him do that when he moved to Connecticut to marry my mother. They wanted to keep him in the office. And so he kind of got discouraged by that, and then he ended up, from the post office, he drove like cement mixers, then he drove a gasoline truck for Hess. And then he started selling life insurance, and then he got into banking. Mm-hmm. And so in my childhood, over those years, I was able to see my dad go from, not knowing what he wanted to being, a high executive in the banking industry.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about your dad here in a second too. An incredible, he's your hero. Your father's your hero. We're going to get into that a little bit. Racism didn't really. 5th or 6th grade, someone, used the N-word towards you, and that was a kind of a tough day for you.
Yeah, like I didn't really see color. I mean, it was just something. It's kind of weird to have to communicate this back to you about it, but I didn't realize I was a black kid till like 5th or 6th grade, and some kid told me, and I had heard so many negative things about black people, cause of the Civil War, come from monkeys, all these kind of things, And I was really depressed. I didn't want to go to school for days. For probably 3-4 days, I didn't go to school because I was depressed. Believe it or not, yeah.
your father, though, your mother, we kind of show up, we no matter what, we kind of make things happen here. And they're very savvy people, and they started giving you, I think, coloring books or comic books.
Yeah, they were like comic books of all the, like Frederick Douglass, all different great black people and their contribution to society. Like the first open heart surgery was done by a black man, so on and so forth. All these different things to try to get me to understand and have pride in the fact that I was black, you know? Mm-hmm. So, so from a reflective view now, I didn't really get a good acceptance from the black community either because I was so light. I was so light-skinned. So, you know, they would call me yellow or whatever, you know, like there was, so I never really got accepted. I probably ultimately ended up getting more acceptance by white people because I was around more than I did black people. But upon reflection, the advantage of that was that I learned how to think for myself. Like I didn't do things to get the approval of other people around me because I never had it to begin with. So I just kind of learned how to be okay with my own thoughts. I mean, I did not have a good self-image, and I started. My first sport was martial arts. It was judo, and then from that I went into ice hockey because my grandfather took me to see a kid in town who was kind of a kid that I looked up to, and he played hockey, and that's what got me interested in playing ice hockey. And so I just put myself and poured myself into that. You know, I remember my parents yelling at me at night, "Stop shooting the pucks down in the basement." You know, the banging off of the thing was reverberating up through the house. And so I just kind of put myself into that. My grandfather was a horseman, and my mother was in rodeos. So on the weekends we went to rodeos every weekend. And you know, like my mother, you know, those white girls did not want my mother to beat them, and so my grandfather would have to actually stand there with a stopwatch and time. He stood next to the timer with his stopwatch to time her times to make sure that they didn't shortcut her on her times and stuff. So that was kind of the environment. And my grandfather was amazing with horses. He had this whole trick horse act, and he could ride 3 horses at one time. He had this skit where like he pretended he was drunk, and then the horse had to get him home. He had a thing with a teeter-totter where he would stand on, or he would start standing on one end of the teeter board, and the horse would get on the other end, and the horse would move till it got balanced, and then he would go from standing to laying down on the horse. And then he had one horse that he would jump through fire. Oh, wow. So he did all these things. Like he called out Roy Rogers all the time, but he was never going to get to that level of fame because of the fact that he was black, you know. And I remember as a kid being in the Meadowlands, and they had this thing called the Black Rodeo, and it was all black cowboys and cowgirls that was there. And Muhammad Ali showed up at the event. And he got on my grandfather's horse. In fact, there's a clip of it on YouTube of Muhammad Ali on my grandfather's horse.
Oh, we got to play that for the audience.
Yeah.
Mark that. Yeah, that's great.
I'll show you. I'll show it to you. And
oh, that's beautiful.
And you know how Ali was. He liked to show off. And
yeah, of course.
Right? Okay, so my grandfather was a tough dude. He was a lot like Fred Sanford. To give you an idea in terms of persona and personality, he was like, you know, like to the point where we would get gifts from the junkyard on, you know, Christmas and stuff. He was just a character. He'd walk in the house with horse shit on his shoes, and my grandmother would go yelling at him, and he would say, well, you got nothing else to do all day, just clean.
Right.
You know, just crazy, you know, stuff. But Ali was on his horse, and he reared the horse up, and my grandfather was like, "Whoa, champ, take it easy. We don't want anybody to get hurt, you know." And he's like, "Okay, Pops." So he did it again. And my grandfather, I could see him like he was starting to get bothered by it, you know? And so after the third time, he went over to Ali and he put his hand on Ali's thigh and he said, "Look, nigga, you might know how to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. If you keep fucking with me, I'm gonna knock you to your knees."
Oh God, that's beautiful,
Yeah,
brother.
yeah, it's hilarious. It was unbelievable. I'll never forget it. But I just remember, as a kid, I remember, wow, my grandfather wasn't intimidated by Muhammad Ali. Like, I can't believe that, you know?
Wow.
And so that was kind of, and my other grandfather was the complete opposite. Like, he was a church-going man, a true gentleman, like my father's father. He was the guy that would go around and he would pick up all the ladies that didn't have rides to church on Sunday, and he would bring them to church. And so I got both sides.
Yeah, both sides.
I got both sides, which was great.
You know, you're very humble, TR. I love that about you. But you were quite an exceptional hockey player.
Well, I could have been better, like, if I believed in myself more.
Okay, so you had lows. Yeah, but you were able to get to a great college.
Yeah.
But before we get to the college part, there's something you told me on Friday that it broke my heart, but also made me love you more. Your coach, right? I think you're at a
Prep school. Yeah, I was at Suffield
but
Academy.
you're getting ready to
I was the only kid on our team that was getting recruited by any colleges. I didn't win MVP for my team, and when I went to college, my parents, one of the first weekends, they went to a minority orientation. And the lady who was the head of it says to my mother, "Who is so-and-so?" And my mother said, "Oh, that's TR's hockey coach." And she's like, "Well, I don't know why he would ask him to write a recommendation for him." My mom's like, "Well, what do you mean?" And he wrote on my recommendation that I didn't have the skills to play college hockey. So it's just, but you know, like, and again, like, you know, when you reflect back on life, I think the thing that's important for people to understand is the things that you're going through at the time that you're going through, like Tony always says, the universe is working for you, it's not working against you.
Yeah.
Right? And so the big takeaway from that for me was that I had to learn how to believe in myself more and not allow what I thought about myself to be dependent upon somebody else. That's number one. And number two, part of the reason that I'm so passionate when I work with people that I work with now, that I want to give them everything that I can to help them succeed, is because I know what it feels like to not get that.
Right.
And if I had a different experience,
Right.
when I was younger, I would not know how to tap into that. Like, I had the desire, I would because I didn't have the self-belief, I felt like I had to work extra hard in order to get anything. So I learned the skill of working hard. But when you work hard and you believe in yourself, then things come much easier than if you just have one side, you know.
Well, let me stop you there, because what you said is so powerful. You know, Tony, we're going to talk about you today. We're going to give you a big shout out, brother. You're going to appreciate this episode. Big time, man. Tony talks about, if it wasn't for his abusive dad, he would not be who he is.
Exactly.
And he, right?
Yeah, and
his
his
violent
mom,
father,
and his
growing
mom,
up in poverty,
yes.
being kicked out at 16,
right.
living, he made that his superpower.
That's right.
And that's what you did too.
That's right. But you know, like, it's funny you say that, but you know, when you hear stories like that from people like Tony, who everybody knows as a successful person, you realize Tony could not have gotten as successful as he got without that. I mean, maybe he could, I mean, whatever. It wouldn't have looked the same, let's put it that way. And it was actually Tony's work that helped me start to understand those things. That, like, when, you know, like, years ago I bought the Personal Power series that he created. And the depth of questions, you know, like ends values, means values, all these different things that were in the exercises in that course really got me to start to look at what my thoughts were, where they came from, how I even got them. And, you know, you just take for granted, you wake up in the morning and there's this conversation floating around in your head. You never take the time to wonder, well, where did that programming come from? And the Personal Power series really helped me to start to unpack, you know, where my thoughts were to that degree. The extensiveness of it is it was really profound for me.
So you're at Trinity. You don't really care about the classes, but you're doing well, and right. Your junior year, you're the MVP.
Yeah.
Senior year, you have another very successful season, right?
Yeah.
And what happens?
Pretty good.
Your senior year.
Okay, so in the junior year, when I got elected captain, I thought to myself, well, what I would like to do is I would like to see if I could get other guys to work out. Like if I could get all the guys on the team to work out, then we would have a more successful year. And at that time, there was a debate in the fitness community whether working out was going to make you muscle bound or whether working out was going to actually be something that could help you improve your athletic performance. So I received a lot of backlash from that suggestion. And at the awards banquet, I invited my grandparents from New York to come up, and my mother's from Suffield came down, and coach stands up and he says, "Well, we have a very special award we would like to present to somebody who's very serious and dedicated about whatever." And he said, "TR, could you come up here, please?" And so I go up there and I'm all excited, and they hand me a case of beer. It was kind of like a FU gift for me. The perception after I won MVP was that I was taking myself too serious, and that because at that time my personality, I was very intense, but I didn't know how to massage people like I was, and so I didn't realize that when you win awards like that, people see you differently. And there's a way, like if you look at Wayne Gretzky or you look at people who are, have received a lot of awards, they're always very gracious. And there's a way that they interact with everybody, from the person who's doing the maintenance in the building to the general. There's a different way you have to interact. And I had no awareness of that because I had never received any acknowledgement for my accomplishments before like that. So I didn't know how to play it differently. And so the way that I came across to my teammates, and of course I'm able to communicate this now upon reflection, was people thought I was taking myself a little too seriously. I would go to the rink my senior year every morning before class. I never got any help. The coach never came. Nobody ever came to help me or whatever. But my goal, I wanted to be a pro hockey player, and I couldn't understand why my coach didn't want to help me. It would only make him look good if I could go on and I could do whatever, So upon reflection, I understand why it happened. And what's really amazing, is my mother on one of my birthdays, when I was living out here now, and she put together a scrapbook for me. And in this scrapbook, it had like my report cards from when I was a kid. Like I wrote this, at that time I thought my idol was Bobby Orr. So I wrote this letter to Bobby Orr, and there was a copy of the letter there. And she had put all these things in there, and I turned the page. And I didn't realize it, but there was a picture of me getting that case of beer.
Oh, wow. Instantly
when I saw the picture, the voice in my head said, "Now don't you see how ironic it is that you got this case of beer as a FU gift for your teammates because you wanted to try to make them better hockey players, and you make your living training the best hockey players in the world." Mm-hmm. It's symbolic.
Yeah, it's beautiful, man.
You understand?
Fucking straight up.
So straight up. So if people are going through things now, do the inner work. And when you do the inner work and you get yourself out of it, you're going to look back at those incidents now that seem overwhelming, and you're going to realize, no, those are the things that made you great. Those are the things that are going to push you. And when you just find that inner confidence, you find that inner drive, you find the inner skills of how to handle these things that seem to be coming at you so fast, you will learn that those incidents are put there to help you to become great. And so I would not be as good at what I'm doing now if I hadn't had those experiences. There's no way.
No, I know that about you, man.
Yeah.
So after that, you were like, I'm done with hockey, though.
I didn't look at hockey.
You're like,
I didn't skate. I didn't do anything for 10 years. I was done with it.
Right. You get involved in Amway. You get involved in Tony Robbins. You're working the phones for the alumni.
Well, yes. My first job when I graduated was I worked for the college. and I would travel to college for the alumni department. We had created this phone-a-thon program where I would get an alumnus who had a big office building with a lot of phones, and we would call all the alums in the area, and they would come and they would get on the phones, and we would try to raise money for the alumni through this phone-a-thon program. And I would travel to different parts of the country. But then part-time, I started working at a gym that was down the street from the college, because once senior year was over and I knew I wasn't going to be able to play hockey anymore, I got into weightlifting. I always used to look at the bodybuilding magazines when I was younger and be fascinated by the look. And because this gym that was down the street from the school had a lot of bodybuilders, and I would look at those guys and I'd be like, wow, those guys are strong. That's what an athlete, wow, that would be amazing, you know? And so I left my position at school and I started working full-time at the gym. And
much to your parents' dismay, right?
Yeah, they thought I lost my mind.
Right.
Because I'm traveling the country and I'm meeting all these influential alumni people, right? And I'm like, hey man, this ain't for me. You know, the last day, one of the things that I'll never forget is I was so bored sitting at my desk one day that I was starting to fall asleep, so I didn't want to get caught falling asleep. So I pulled out my chair and I went underneath in the cubicle, and then I pulled the chair in and I just took a nap under there. And I woke up because I heard somebody saying, has anybody seen TR? You know, like, where's TR? And then I got back in my chair and I go, oh, I'm over here, you know? And I just knew that I couldn't, as a living, sit behind the desk. That was the one incident that let me know. And the other one happened to me when I was younger. Like, my dad was a banker. He was a commercial loan officer for CBT, Connecticut Bank and Trust. And every year, you know, my dad would want to try to get promoted. And so I always remember in the summertime, my dad, we would go as a family. When we took vacations, we started out with a 5-person tent because it was myself and my 2 younger brothers, and we would go camping at these different places. And one year we went up to Dartmouth, and the reason that we camped up there in Hanover was because my dad was taking a financial course there at Dartmouth. And the reason that he was doing those things was because whenever he got passed over for a promotion, they had to communicate to him what it was. If his writing skills weren't up to snuff, all I knew was my dad was taking a writing course. If it was something else, because he didn't have an MBA, he went and he started taking these financial classes. So he didn't want race to be the reason that he didn't get accepted for these positions. So whatever excuse they gave him why he didn't get promoted, he would get better at that skill so they couldn't use it against him again. And one day he called me in and he wanted to have a conversation with me. And I think the reason he wanted to have the conversation with me was because he didn't want me to think less of him as a man because he wasn't going to get promoted anymore. And the reason he found out ultimately that he wasn't going to get promoted anymore is because at one of the Christmas parties, his boss got really drunk and my dad decided to drive him home so he wouldn't get into an accident or whatever. And on the way home, he started confessing to my father how much he admired him, how much he looked up to him. And he just told him, he said, look, I just want you to know flat out that you're not going to get higher in the bank because you're black. And so my dad wanted to teach me a lesson. You never let that be an excuse why you can't achieve something. If somebody says that, you get yourself better at that, so it can't be used against you as an excuse or whatever, right? And so, you know, ultimately my dad left that bank and then went on to become the president of a bank. But he never, the lesson for me was you never let that be an excuse why you don't achieve something. And that doesn't have to do necessarily just with color. That could be with respect to anything. If you know, whatever it is, if somebody says you're not good enough at something, then get good at it.
Right, exactly.
And then they can't, you know, use it against you. It just takes a little time, but it's ultimately going to make you better. So
and then you're at this gym and you're like, this is what I want.
Yeah, I wanted to learn everything.
So let's talk about the early time at that gym. And then you had a couple young lads come in that day, right?
Yeah, like I at that time I want the thing that was cool about this particular gym was it was a 2-family house, and the first floor, the basement, and the garage the guy converted into a gym. And the upstairs were apartments. And he lived in one apartment, and then I was able to actually live in the apartment across the hall from him. And I wanted to learn everything. I wanted to learn how to do the maintenance on the equipment, clean the bathrooms, sell the memberships, how to work out, how to do the maintenance on all the equipment. I just wanted to learn everything about it because I was passionate about it and I loved it. And his goal was to go from this facility into what most gyms are now. Like he would actually come out to Gold's and he saw what Gold's Gym was like, and that was the ultimate gym model for gyms globally. Mm-hmm. And so there was no gyms like that in Connecticut. So he went, and that was his goal. And I didn't realize it at the time, but he ended up being probably the biggest steroid dealer in the country. And so all I know is I was taking out UPS boxes every day to the truck, and they were going here and going there, and I just thought it was vitamins. I didn't even ask no questions, you know. Mm-hmm. And he saved up his money, and then he bought land and he built that gym. So I was able to see that whole process go from nothing to something. Wow. And so when we went over to that new gym, he didn't think that my personality would be the right kind of personality to run the gym. And I was like insulted by it. So I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm gonna open my own gym. And so I said to my dad one day, I said, Dad, I think I'd like to open a gym. And he said, well, you're gonna have to do a business plan. And me not being the most academically oriented guy, I could do my work, but I never enjoyed it. He threw me a book and he said, okay, this book will tell you how to write a business plan. Write a business plan, then you're gonna have to go out, you're gonna have to find people who are gonna wanna put money into it and the whole thing. And I said, okay, and God, if he wasn't shocked that I came back and I had done all that stuff. And then I went out and I got my own loan at the SBA and I opened my own gym. And before I was finished, I had 2 of my own gyms. And before I moved out here, I merged those 2 gyms in with a bigger organization. And with the deal being that I could do all the private training, I could sell vitamins, I could sell clothes, I could do it in this one location first, and then once we learned how to get along, then I could do it in 28 of their other clubs. So for me, that was like a no-brainer. But I was like, my God, what am I doing fitness in Connecticut when a lot of my friends, a lot of guys that I would talk to all the time were the pro bodybuilders that were out here in California. And I'm like, you know what? I go out here every time I get a chance to get on vacation, I would come out here. And so I was like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to start over. And that's what I did. I merged my gyms in with this other company, and that company is actually now Planet Fitness. When I moved out here, to establish credibility, my first year here, I didn't train anybody. I just worked out, and I worked out with all different pro bodybuilders in my first year out here. And then for probably 3 years, my consistent workout partner was Lou Ferrigno. And the last years that he was competing were the years that we were training together. So when you go into Gold's and you see all the pictures of Lou up on the wall, that's when we were training together.
For people who know who Lou Ferrigno is, he's the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, he's
an incredible human being.
Yes. And what was hilarious about training with him is he was deaf.
Right.
And in the gym, we're hard of hearing. In the gym, it was very competitive. Guys would all train at the same place. So all of a sudden, I'd hear Lou start swearing under his breath, and I'd be like, "What's the matter, Lou?" And he goes, "That guy over there is talking crap about me." Like he could read lips across the gym. he didn't have to hear him. He could tell when people were talking about him. So he could tell by just reading lips. It was hilarious,
Wow. So you're training him. People are starting to and then what happens?
Yeah. So then I established my own credibility in the gym, and I decided I'm going to start training people. I would come in to the gym when I wasn't training, and I would sit up on the cardio, and I would just watch people train, watch how they train, watch trainers, watch how they interacted with their clients, because there was a guy named Body by Jake who was really famous for training.
He was the guy, Body by Jake.
He was the guy, and I was like, when I moved out here, I'm like, I'm gonna blow this Body by Jake guy out of the water, that was my goal. And so when I was in the gym, I wanted to see what all these other people were doing to train people. And I noticed, in Connecticut, we didn't have as many accessories for machines, different kind of handles, different bars, different. And so I was like, I want to see what's going on. Why does one guy look this way and another guy look that way? And I would just sit up there on that bike for hours and I would watch people train, and I would see what the different effect was, different handles had on the body and all this. And so I started training people. I had good credibility in the gym, and eventually I had enough credibility where people would try to refer people to me. And so one day this guy came up to me and he said, listen, he said, I have a buddy who plays pro hockey, and if he's thinking of moving out here for the summer, would you be willing to train him? And I said, sure. And his name was Alan May, was the hockey player's name. He's now a color commentator for the Washington Capitals. And I said, sure. So I'm training Alan, and we're getting near the end of the summer, and we're doing this stuff. And then Tony Danza came in to the gym with Rick Valenti and this other guy who was a professional hockey player, Chris Chelios. And they were watching me train Alan. And like after 2 or 3 days, Chelly came over to me and he said, I've never seen anybody train people like this before. He goes, what is this kind of training? You know, like if I come out here next summer, would you be willing to take me on or whatever? And I was like, sure. Now, I never told him this, but as a player, I didn't even like the guy. You know what I mean? So, but I knew he was a big name.
Why do you like him?
Oh, he was so nasty. He was like a junkyard dog, you know? Like he was mean. He was mean and snarly.
Yeah.
And as a player, he was playing against teams that I liked. So that's why I didn't want. But he was the first American to ever be captain of like the Montreal Canadiens. So I started working with Chelly, and he was the real first big name superstar athlete that I worked with. Other athletes that I worked with before him were like Gabby Reese, who was a pro beach volleyball player, and she was also a high level model. But she wasn't Gabby Reese yet, you know, like she was in the way, working her way up. So that was kind of the extent of the athletes that I had. And then because I got those, I started to get more and more and more through word of mouth or whatever, you know. And
were you at Gold's End? Was Pro Camp set up there?
Yeah.
Because your office is at Gold's Gym, right?
That's where I came up with the name for Pro Camp, was after I started training Chelly and more athletes, because my goal was to try to have an environment that would help make them better athletes. And so it was like a camp. I didn't really train any fitness people. I just was, pretty much training all pro athletes at the time.
Well, one of the things that makes you so distinguished of what you do is you're obviously very curious, and you're looking at things people don't look at, and you were curious why these guys keep getting these injuries.
Yeah, I was at home, and I used to like to watch the games to see if there were things that I could pick up that would help, them train better.
You had two TVs watching your players, right?
Eventually, I got two. I still have two TVs set up now, like one on top of the other. There was a time when any night of the week, I had multiple people on TV, whether it was actors or athletes or whatever. So, but in this instance, early on, I went to watch one of Alan's games, and he wasn't in the lineup, and I couldn't understand, where was he? I knew he had a good summer of training, and so I called him after the game and left a message. He called me back, and he said, "Oh, I got hurt." And I remember I had this visceral feeling in my stomach, like, oh my God, like how could he possibly get hurt? Like I must have done something wrong. And I was scared that he wasn't going to want to come back. And so I was apologizing and this and that and the other thing. And it, for whatever reason, this voice in my head said, look, TR, if you're going to train these guys, the main priority has to be that they don't get hurt. Like it was easy for me to make people bigger, faster, stronger. That was easy. I could just use a lot of the bodybuilding principles for that. But that wasn't what was going to stop them from getting injured. So I had to try to figure out, okay, well, why do people get hurt in the first place? What is it? Like, how can I figure out why they get hurt? Because if I can figure out why they get hurt, then I can figure out how to prevent it. Because let's say on a shoulder injury, my thought was, if a guy first came to me and he could lift 40 pounds with his shoulder, and if I could get him to lift 70 pounds with his shoulders, he's never going to have a shoulder problem. And that wasn't the case. And so my girlfriend at the time she worked at Centinela Fitness Institute, which was part of Centinela Hospital, and they did all the fitness testing for all the pro teams in LA. And I said, listen, when those guys come out here to train with me, we're going to do the same thing. The first day that they come in, we're going to fitness test them, and we're going to find out why this is happening. And in the early years of my fitness testing, I look at the results, and there's all these numbers on a piece of paper. Like, she looked at range of motion and all the joints. We did a submax VO2. We did all these different things. But some of the guys who were scoring the worst on the test were the best players. So I was like, oh man, this doesn't have any correlation to reality. And then I started thinking, well, how can I figure out, if there was a way that I could see the body like it had no skin, then I could maybe see what was causing these injuries, and then I could do something about it. So I remember from getting massages and massage work that I would get done on me, that I could get something done from massage, and then I would actually feel better when I went to go work out the next time. So I talked to that particular therapist. His name was John Switzer, and I said, well, John, how does this work? Like, what happens and whatever? And he told me different things, like when muscle tissue is really unhealthy, it hurts and it's really sensitive. So I know anybody that goes to a spa and gets a massage, some places you go and you get the massage, you don't feel nothing. Other parts of your body, it hurts like heck when they're working on it. The place where it hurts like heck is where you have unhealthy tissue. So I said, okay, we're going to add this into my assessment process, because I want to know where the healthy tissue is, where the unhealthy tissue is. And then one of the other things that we would do is I had this really meticulous Austrian nutritionist, and we would get all the blood work, so he could look at all the blood work. Another thing that I knew that was an issue was posture. And you could tell things that were going wrong in the body by posture. Posture, it's almost like looking at, you know how those scientists look at the rings of a tree and they can tell what's going on with the health of the tree by the rings? Well, you can do the same thing with a person's posture. So then we started taking pictures of everybody's posture. We took it from the front, from the back, from both sides. And I first started using a Polaroid camera. So we would take these Polaroids, and I would have these Polaroids, pictures of people. And the only other thing that I felt was missing was, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I could see how their body breaks down when they're actually doing their sport? So I bought slide boards, and I set up a video camera, and I would have them go as hard as they could for a minute on the slide board. And I could see how long it would take for them to get tired. And when they got tired, I could see how their body would break down. Like I could visually see how it would break down. So now we had all this information in the assessment. We had posture, we had all the range of motion stuff, we had healthy, unhealthy soft tissue, and we had how they do when they perform. So now I was able to start to identify, by correlating all this information, I was able to start to identify how and why people get hurt. And so I would get my nutritionist, I would get my massage people, and I would get my trainers, and we would all sit down in the same room. And I would say, okay, to the massage guy, what are you trying to do first? And I would say to the nutritionist, what are you trying to do first? Because I did not want a client to go to one person and him tell him one thing, the other one tell him something else, and then the trainers are telling them something. I wanted a homogeneous experience for the client. I wanted everybody on the same page. And what I discovered is the way that I was training people was working against some of what other people were doing. Or, for example, if the massage therapist was trying to make somebody's muscle tissue healthier quicker, and it wasn't happening quicker, he would communicate to the nutritionist, hey man, this guy must be fudging on his nutrition because it's been this number of weeks and he is not getting better. And so we were able to homogenize the experience. It was like a car. In my mind, it was like a car wash. They came in dirty. We wanted to get the soap. We wanted to scrub them. We wanted to put the brush on them and then polish them so that when they went back. And so the training process that I developed became all of the solutions for the problems that the assessment identified. And we did the assessment. I probably did the assessment for probably 15 years before I stopped.
Right. And it worked. Your players, they didn't get injured.
I never had injuries.
That's amazing.
I never had a player have a major injury since in all my time at training.
And when they retired Chris's jersey at the United Center, you were there.
Yeah, he invited me there. Yeah.
What was that like?
It was first to have him mention me at his Hall of Fame speech.
Fuck.
Was
wow, man.
That was. I mean, I'm sitting there watching TV, and he said, and I was like, I couldn't believe it. You know, like it was like, made my parents proud too. You understand? Because don't forget, I left Trinity to go do this thing.
Oh, it's not forgotten, brother. It's not forgotten.
So that was the thing, and so to be able to go to the United Center, and be there on the ice. Have him talk about me in front of the United Center and the people at the ceremony, and be there for that. It was, I don't know. There's no words. There's no words that can describe the gratitude and the feeling. Like so many people take for granted what I was trying to do. And so for me to get that acknowledgement from him was really beyond words, actually.
Calls you.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to talk about much, just because I want to keep it quiet.
Yeah, okay, got it, done. I'll tell you.
But we can talk about, I can talk about him without talking about him.
Let's talk about him without talking about him.
In terms of the assessment, like why it was such a special process and how it informed the way that I train people. A really famous athlete came to me last year who had suffered a really bad Achilles tear. And he reached out to me because he wasn't progressing in his rehab the way that he wanted to, and he was getting scared because the season was coming up and it was about to start. And so I did a little research. I asked him for video of him playing, because one of the things that I always like to do, and one of the benefits for me watching guys play all the time, I could tell when guys weren't doing the exercises I wanted them to do because their stride was off or something in their performance would be off, and that was because they weren't doing an exercise that was designed to help that movement pattern or whatever, right? So I wanted to get familiar with his movement patterns, and I could tell that I asked him the question, when you're playing, has anybody ever stepped on your foot, the front of your foot? And he said, probably 100 times. And I said, okay. So I knew that there was scar tissue there. And the way that he got hurt is somebody came from behind him, and because his foot, like if you look at from your toes forward, let's say your toes are over here and this is the back part of your foot and your ankle goes up here. In the middle of your foot, there's a joint. Well, when he kept getting stepped on a foot, this thing developed scar tissue in between it, so his foot couldn't bend from the toes forward. So when he got hit from behind, because his foot couldn't bend, all this additional stress went towards the ankle and the Achilles, and because it was somebody else's body weight when he went forward, it basically ripped the Achilles out of the back of his heel. And that was, so the injury was the Achilles, but the cause wasn't the Achilles.
Got it, right.
And what happens is most people, anytime they get any kind of source of pain, they think that the pain is where the cause of the injury is. And that's not always the case. It's the effect. So because his foot couldn't bend, all the additional stress went to the ankle and the Achilles tore. So in order for me to fix the foot and the Achilles, I had to realign all the bones in his feet so that we could get that foot to bend the way that it was supposed to bend. And after the first treatment of doing that, he looked at me and he said, I haven't been able to walk like this for 20 years. Wow. And so it was just a testimony to the process that was created, and there's many examples. Like I had a wide receiver who chronically was pulling one hamstring, and he couldn't figure out what to do. He got all the therapy, treatment, ultrasound, all this other kind of stuff. But what people didn't understand, because they didn't understand the correlation between posture and performance, this line between my fingers, let's say that's your hamstring. When your hips are even, that distance between my fingers shows the amount of pressure on my hamstring. If my hips get pulled up, the hamstring gets pulled tight. Now, what's the normal thing that somebody thinks when they have a tight muscle? I want to get on the floor and stretch. Well, this guy's hamstring was already stretched too tight. That's why he felt that it was tight. So they're getting on the floor, doing all these other kind of stretches and all this, and it was contributing to the problem. It wasn't fixing the problem. What we had to actually do is we had to actually get the hip to come down so that it would take pressure off the hamstring, and then it would never get hurt again. Like the hamstring never got hurt again. And because if you look at the anatomy of the hips, both your right and left hip, they're not connected as one piece. They're two different pieces. And because one side was raised up higher than the other side, that was why one hamstring was getting more, always having the chronic problem as opposed to the other side. And so it's just, things like that, having that kind of understanding. And it goes back to, okay, now I discovered what the problem, so the next question becomes, what causes these things? Like, why does this stuff happen? And I actually traced it back to what I coined the genetic growth program. When Dylan was young, the first thing that he did as a strength training method was crawl. That develops all the core muscles in your shoulder, it develops all the core muscles along your spine, it develops all the core muscles in your hip. But you never taught him how to crawl biomechanically the right way, nor did you have any control over how he grew. I mean, his feet could have grown like this way before anything else. His upper body could have been, growing faster. His hands could, you had no control over how he grows. We have no control over how we grow, and we develop compensation patterns for movements that we do as a result. So what you'll see some parent whose kid isn't fast. Well, when he's going through his growth spurt, and all of a sudden his legs were this long are now this long, and he doesn't have the inner core strength in his hips, which people don't even know that there are inner core muscles in the hips. The reason he's not fast is because that inner structure isn't strong enough to handle the literal weight. So you develop compensation problems. And then what they do is they think, okay, my kid's not fast. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put him on a treadmill, and I'm going to make him run really fast on the treadmill. And what they don't understand is that's going to make the problem exponentially worse, because now you're forcing the body to do something even faster that it couldn't do before. In the short term, they might get faster, but in the long term, they end up with low back problems or pull hamstrings or whatever. There's a myriad of problems that can happen. And so when you look at what's going on in the fitness industry now, what's driving the fitness industry and what's driven it forever has been cosmetic appearance. And because people are interested in their cosmetic appearance, that informs their workout choices. If you look at orthopedic surgeons are busier now than they've ever been. Who are they working on? Not couch potatoes. They're working on all these supposedly fit, active people, and because they train wrong, and they don't get these compensation patterns out of their body, when they go to do these activities, they're making themselves worse and they end up getting injured, and that's why they end up having the surgeries. And the problem is that the surgery fixes the effect, it still doesn't get the cause. That's why people have multiple surgeries, because they never get at what caused the problem in the first place, and because they don't get what caused the problem in the first place, they never get the right solution to it. And so in my journey, I spend half my day now training people, and the other half I spend my time doing body work and corrective things on people, because the other thing that people have no clue of is they don't even know what healthy muscle tissue feels like. And so to make your audience understand, healthy muscle tissue is like a wet sponge. It's elasticy, it springs back, it has good blood flow, good circulation, and unhealthy muscle tissue is like a dry sponge. It's hard, it's easy to tear, it's brittle, and that's why people tear muscles or pull things, and because the elasticity of the muscle tissue isn't right. And so I would say that 95% of the way people work out now is wrong. And they don't realize it's wrong because they're being driven by their personal insecurities as opposed to, okay, have you ever gone to the LA Marathon? I've never seen a collection of more unhealthy people in my life. I mean, look at these things. I'm serious. Like,
I know you are, buddy.
They got knee things on, they got this thing wrong, they got that. But that's because running as an activity, Tony talks about this a lot. He talks about neurochemicals and how neurochemicals drive behavior. Okay, well, endorphins are designed to help you mask physical pain. So think about this. You got a slight knee injury, you're getting a little jolt of endorphins, then you run, which running is going to give you more endorphins. Mm-hmm. So you're getting a hit. Look at people running. You never see anybody running down the street and they look healthy or they look happy, but they run because it's a psychological escape, right? Dopamine is another neurochemical. So when you go to like CrossFit, you got all these people that think, okay, I'm not in shape, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna just destroy myself in CrossFit. And what happens is part of the nomenclature in a workout like CrossFit is they have all the exercises listed. Okay, today you're gonna do all these exercises. And what happens after you finish every exercise? What happens after you finish each exercise is you get an endorphin hit. So now you've got these neurochemicals are what's driving people's fitness behavior. It's not, what do I need to do to make my muscle tissue healthier? How do I need to train to do that? What are the selection of exercises that are going to help me get rid of the compensation patterns that I've accumulated over time? What is it that I need to, what are the behaviors that I need to do to become healthy?
So for the audience, what are some basic, simple things that they can do to work out the right way? What are some of just the basic TR Goodman techniques? Because not everyone's going to have the benefit of right?
Yeah, no, I understand, but the basic things is you have to think about. I call it the yin yang theory. So as soon as you do an exercise for chest, you have to immediately do an exercise for back, because let's take your legs for example. If you do leg extension, your quads fire. If you do leg curls right after, your hamstrings fire, but your quads shut off. Right? So by doing this yin-yang thing, you never leave the quad traumatized, you leave it relaxed because you're doing things like that. So there's a way of doing your exercises, selections, in such a way that you help to encourage the healthiness of the muscle tissue. Like doing 15 reps as opposed to 8 reps. Things like that. Like there's a chemistry. Training people on a high level, there's a real chemistry to it. Fortunately, I have created a systematic process for it. Some of the times when you come into the office and you see everybody in the office and they're working out in the office and we're not in the gym, those exercises that they're doing there are designed to strengthen all their hip core muscles or their shoulder core muscles. And by strengthening those shoulder core or hip core muscles, you help to realign your posture, and you help to eliminate any problems that can happen where your structure is not properly aligned or is not balanced the right way. But making choices because you want to be healthy as being the driving force for your workouts, as opposed to making choices because you think you want to have six-pack abs. Okay, well, you have six-pack abs, but in the process of doing all those leg raises, because your hip core muscles weren't strong enough for the weight of your legs, and you've been going out there and you've been doing squats and you've been doing leg presses, which is going to put more muscle on your legs, make your leg bigger and heavier. Well, your support muscles for moving your hips weren't strong enough for the weight of your leg before, but now you've just made your leg bigger and heavier, and you're doing all these leg raises because you think it's going to work your lower abs, and all it's doing is making your psoas, which attaches to the back of your spine, get tight, and when it gets tight, it compresses your vertebrae in your spine, and you end up with back problems. Then you can't figure out, you got six-pack abs, but you're in the hospital getting a back surgery.
Well, there's some very good spiritual metaphors here for recovery. And people, right?
Yeah.
Big time. We'll get into that. So let me ask you this, buddy. People, as you know, a lot of folks come to Shell. In order for it to work, there has to be a buy-in. They got to buy into the program here.
Yeah.
I've watched, you've got some, you're working with all these, they got to buy into your program. Mm-hmm. And how do you deal with all these egos and these different people? They've tried everything.
It's an awesome question. And in my early career years, what I did not realize, I was very dictatorial. But that's because I knew the things that I was going to ask people to do hadn't been seen before, and they didn't know what it was. But what I did not realize at the time, was I'm talking to everybody's subconscious. Okay? And I didn't realize the power of the subconscious. So when you come into my office sometimes, you'll hear that I'm playing someone talking about the mind and all that other stuff. And that's because when people come to me, they see me as the fitness authority. They don't see me as the mind authority. So I put a mind authority on at the same time. But what they're doing is they're re-strengthening their structure, their physical structure. And at the same time, I have them listening to content that's going to help them understand their mental structure. Mm-hmm. So that when they're rebuilding themselves, they're not only rebuilding their physical body, but they're rebuilding their mind at the same time. Because it's that subconscious conversation that drives their behavior. Mm. And they're asking me, when you think of the concept of pushing somebody, what does that mean? That means you're putting me in the position to get you to do something you don't want to do. So I'm automatically the enemy, right off the jump. But in my early years, I didn't know how to communicate to that subconscious in a way that didn't leave everybody hating me, in a sense, like they did it and they did it because I told them to do it. I wasn't communicative enough to make them understand why I was asking them to do it, how it was going to benefit them, and what would be the thing. In my case, in the early years, well, even now to a certain extent, people know that I get results. So it's, in some ways, it's easier to get people to buy in, but it's never easy because if they knew or wanted to do it, they wouldn't be coming to me.
Right. Exactly.
Right. So now I know I'm smart enough to know that I'm communicating with their subconscious. And the reason that I became aware of this in my own life was, I remember I had a girl who was a masseuse, and she said, I just had this incredible reading with this psychic. And I was like, wow, can you get me a reading with this psychic? And she's like, yes, I'll see what I can do. I said, tell her I can do any time just because I'm close. And what came out of my reading was, she said, you have amazing healing abilities, and you need to go to this school. It's called Pranic Healing. And it'll help you develop your healing abilities. Well, Pranic Healing is an energy healing school, and it was in fact, Master Ko, who's the head teacher now, is the one who does all the meditations for Tony Robbins now. Mm-hmm. But his teacher was still alive when I first started. So like me and Master Ko would hang out while the Big Cheese was in town, like whatever. And the thing that was amazing about him was I always had this fantasy in my head of like what the Shaolin monks were like, where they had these wise teachers that would teach them stuff, because years ago there was a show on called Kung Fu with David Carradine, and these wise monks would teach him, and then he would go out in the world, and if anybody wanted to confront him, he knew how to handle the situation. And it was the teachings that were really important. And fortunately for me, when I was a kid, I had a guy that was somewhat like that as a judo instructor, but when I started doing karate and different other martial arts, I never was able to find that same kind of teacher. Long story short, when I first met Master Choa, who was the originator of the pranic healing system, I was wondering if this guy is really going to let me down again like all these other teachers, or if he's going to be the real deal. So I'll never forget the first retreat that I went to. He was speaking, and I was at the back of the room. And he was speaking at the front of the class, and then he stopped to take a break. And I was standing in the back of the room, and I was staring at him, and I was looking at him, and I was saying in my head, are you real? Are you for real? Are you the real deal? Or are you going to be like these other people who let me down? Like, are you real? Like, okay. At the same time, literally, I'm saying that in my head. All of a sudden, he looks up, and he stares at me right in the eye. And Seano, if I didn't see it, I would not believe it. His head turned into a bull. It like morphed, and I was like, holy smokes, how is what I'm seeing what I'm seeing? And I was like, wow, I meant no disrespect. I just wanted to make sure if I was going to dedicate myself to this, you were the right person for me to follow, and I put my head down, and I was like, whoa. Well, one of the things that he used to do to me when he would come into town is he would always make me come in front of class and flex for people. Now, he would always say to people, listen, it's very important, you guys, you want to do these meditations, you want to do all these spiritual things. Well, Dao Mo, the reason he taught all these monks martial arts exercise is because they couldn't do high-level meditations, and their physical bodies couldn't handle it. So TR's example, the importance of having a strong body. Now, I knew that because I didn't like doing it, but he kept making me do it. So I knew that if a guy was on this level, there was something he was teaching me that I had to figure out. And what came to me was I must have had ego problems, and he wanted to see if I was getting off on the fact that I was flexing in front of these, or make me aware that in previous lives or whatever, maybe why I didn't become more successful was my ego got in the way of things. And so because I looked at him as that kind of a teacher, I knew that there was a lesson why he kept putting me in that situation. And because of that, I realized, wow, my whole business was built the wrong way. I wanted to destroy other trainers. I wanted to be the most dominant person in the gym. I used to love going in there and having all my people take over a certain area of the place and so on and so forth. And if anybody asked me a question about somebody else, I would say, that guy doesn't know this and doesn't. I wanted to be, and that was the ego, right? So I realized, wow, okay, there's an ego thing. I need to humble myself. And so I became more aware of trying to be humble. And there was a meditation that we would do. It was like brushing your teeth every day. It was called Twin Hearts Meditation. You would bless the earth from your heart, from your crown, and then both with the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. Bless people with love and kindness, all this stuff. And I would do that every day. And I realized one day that my muscles, all my muscles, and the reason I was so strong was built on all this rage and hate and insecurities from childhood, from me being a little black kid who didn't get the right respect in Connecticut from people, from me not getting the right acknowledgement in sports and all this. That's what my muscle fibers were made out of. And by doing that meditation and blessing people every day, the literal vibration of my muscles changed. My temperament changed from doing the meditations on a daily basis. And so then I realized that the way that I have to interact with people, I have to be more compassionate, because people have this conversation running them that they don't even understand it's running them. And when you listen to like somebody like Bruce Lipton, who talks about epigenetics, which is at the core of why we all get disease, it's not genes. It's the environment. It's your mental perception. It's how you perceive what was said to you by that other person that causes you to feel anger or causes you to feel anxious or whatever. That's what are the seeds of disease. It's not your genetics. Your genetics is just strictly like a blueprint. The pattern could be there if you express it, but it doesn't have to manifest that way. So when I realized in his teachings that your subconscious mind starts to be implanted in you in the last trimester of your mother's pregnancy, I was like, wow, people don't have a chance. They have no idea to the depth of which this subconscious programming has an influence over their ability to perceive and see things in life. So when I communicate with people now, I have way more compassion. I have way more patience and understanding, so that because I understand that people don't realize what's driving their conversation.
That's beautiful. And you're not competing anymore.
I'm not competing anymore. I would like to, and I'm in the process of preparing me as a being to have the next second explosion in my business, which is going to come when all my crap about me is done. When that's gone, that's the foundation now that I go to the next level. And for me, the next level is going to be able to help more people, to bring more awareness. Because right now there is no spirituality in the fitness industry at all. But if you look at the most ancient forms of exercise, you look at karate, you look at aikido, you look at any one of them, they have a belt system. You start with the white belt and you end up with the black belt. And what the black belt's supposed to symbolize is you've done something so long and so consistent, what was once white becomes so soiled that it becomes black. And that's in each, why do you go from a white belt to a yellow belt to a blue belt why is there a belt system? Because you're being taught different levels of the exercise. So nobody goes into a yoga class. I mean, you first go into a yoga class and you want to go because they got hot looking chicks in there. And then by the time you're done, you're learning how to put more of yourself in every pose, in every movement. It's the hero's journey. You go from the outside, the external, superficial, to the inside. But that doesn't exist in the fitness industry right now. And my goal is to bring that awareness, to bring that consciousness to the fitness industry so that people understand, like you asked me, well, okay, they can't afford to go to you or whatever. They don't have access to you, whatever. But there's levels. You know, there's levels, and having the quick fix so that you can look good, so you can get the girl, and then all of a sudden all your insecurities come out and then you end up divorced. What was the point of that anyway?
Right.
You understand what I'm saying? So that awareness needs to be brought into the fitness vernacular, and that's my goal. That's my quest. That's what I want to do.
Oh, that's beautiful, buddy. And you're the guy to do it. Let's close with some of the folks you worked with that I've enjoyed watching you over the years. The great James Caan.
Yeah, man. Nobody had better stories.
He's the ultimate storyteller.
No.
Jimmy's the ultimate storyteller.
Not just a storyteller,
right?
But he actually lived the stuff he tells the stories about.
Yeah, he's the real, right.
Yeah, I mean, unbelievable. I remember one time, the first time, I remember being back in Connecticut and looking at a Playboy magazine, and the first Latino girl who was this Playmate of the Month was this girl, Devin DeVasquez. So Jimmy says, TR, he used to take me to the Playboy Mansion to watch the fights. This was before you could get pay-per-view in your house. So he would take me over there, and Hef only had 25 people there. It was a small group of people that were there, and Jimmy would always take me there with him. Who's the first girl I meet? Devin DeVasquez. So I'm like, oh my God, like this is unbelievable. Like when Jimmy was the Grand Marshal for the Daytona 500, they asked him to do it. The only reason he said yes is because he knew I was a NASCAR fan. And so he took us, and we flew on this private jet. It was a commercial airliner that they had converted into this private jet. He flew me down so I would have a first-class experience at the Daytona 500. And he treated me like a son. Frank Gehry,
Yeah, Frank Gehry, the great Frank Gehry.
Frank Gehry treated me like a son.
I loved watching you guys work.
I was so dumb at the time. I had no idea like what he was doing. Like he would ask me, "Hey TR, could you drive me down?" Like this is when they were building the Disney concert hall. So he was like, "Yeah, I don't feel good driving today. Could you drive me down? Like, you drive me down this afternoon?" I was like, "Okay, sure, I'll drive you down." And he would take me down there, and I would get exposed to all this other stuff. And there were times where he would go down, and there would be like the Columbia University architecture students were there. And he would answer questions from the architecture students. And he would tell them how, well, now the way the construction works is we use lasers. And so when they make a beam, because of the lasers, we can get the beam so precise that it's like within a 1/16 of an inch from the time they manufacture it to the time that they put it here. Or the way that they dug out the earth in the parking lot, they dug it out like the base of a drum, so that when the cars came into the parking lot, it would absorb all the noise from the cars. Like stuff that you would never know. And then I would cross-pollinate. So one time, Frank, we brought like Chelly, all his family, Keith Primo, all his family, all these hockey players, they brought their families, and we had a private tour of Disney Concert Hall by Frank when they were building it. And then when it was Frank's 70th birthday, all the guys signed uniforms, had them framed, and I went over to Frank's office with like a dozen framed uniforms for half, because he grew up in Canada, he was a hockey fan, and I was able to start cross-pollinating, where I took him and Ray Liotta down to the Stanley Cup when it was in Anaheim, and the people were going crazy because those two guys were down there, and it was just, it's the things that I've been able to be exposed to, or going to the DMZ with Peter Berg, because he was promoting the movie Battleship at the time, and he took me with him to. We went to Japan, and then we went to South Korea, and because his dad was in the Korean War, he wanted to see the DMZ, which is the border between the North and the South, and you see that thing on TV, and you got the guards, and you got the whole thing. And it was so cold that day, I could not believe it. And the guy was saying, yeah, he said, it was so cold during the Korean War. There were times when guys went to pull the trigger on a shotgun, and their fingers would frostbite, and their fingers would come off. Yeah, stuff like that. And it was so cold this day. And we were in this building on the American side, and the guy's giving us these rules. He's like, okay, because we had 6 military guys as an escort for us to be at this thing. And he's like, okay, now when we walk outside, we're going to take you over into, because they have these buildings there, they look like little barracks, and on one side of the table is North Korea, on the other side is South Korea. He said, we're going to take you in here. He said, so when we go outside, if you're going to have your hands in your pockets, leave your hands in your pockets. Don't make no sudden moves. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't do the other. And I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, what am I don't need to see this place this bad, right? So we go out there, and all the troops that were guarding us had those like Terminator mirrored glasses on, and their helmets, and they had this. And the reason that they wore those glasses is because they showed no facial expression, so that they could never give the North Korean troops an excuse to shoot them or attack them or anything.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So we're in this building, and one of the things that they warn us about is a lot of times the North Korean troops will come in and look into the building and try to intimidate you when they're in there. So if they do that, don't get scared. We're allowed to be in here. You're not going to get kidnapped or any of this other kind of stuff. And we had these dudes guarding us, and they had no facial expression whatsoever. And we're in there, and sure as shit, the troops come over there, the North Korean troops, and they're looking at us. They're looking at us. And when we walked out of that building, he said, okay, his back was to the building, he's facing us, and he says, okay, I want you to look over my shoulder. You see that window on the left? On the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to see a circle. They're taking your picture, so you might as well smile. They're going to try to figure out who you are.
Whoa.
What am I doing here? Right? But it was an unbelievable thing.
Wow.
To go there and to... When you go, it's only like 30 miles from the capital in Seoul to the DMZ. So when we go on the highway, it's a regular highway like the 405. The farther north we go, there's less and less cars, and they have these big, huge concrete abutments on both sides of the highway. And it dawns on you after a while, wait, there's no bridge. Why do they need these big things? And every quarter of a mile, there's a guard shack with a guy with a Uzi, a South Korean troop with a Uzi watching the river, because one time the North Korean Special Forces guys snuck down the river and attacked what was their version of the White House. It's called the Blue House. So they have guards now stationed at the river all the time. And so the farther north we go, we're on a highway like the 405, and by the time we get to the DMZ, it was like COVID here. There was we were the only car on the road. There was no other buildings that were being developed. Nothing else was developed. And those big abutments, what they were for was because if they ever went to war, they would blow those things up and it would seal off the highway. That way the North Korean troops just couldn't drive their tanks down the highway system and get right to the...
Oh, that must have been a fun outing. I go back to your shop there, which I love going through. It's a special place. And I say, I need your help with somebody. Oh, Seano, whatever you need. And you said, well, who is it? And I go, it's Tyson. Okay, we'll make it happen. That was it, right?
Yeah.
And then I bring Mike in. What was that like from the first time meeting him to, all the years we trained together?
Yeah. You know what? Let me just tell you how stupid I am. When I was doing martial arts back in Connecticut, I thought, you know what? Maybe it'd be cool to go at Mike Tyson a little bit. And then the first time I saw him, and I looked at his body structure, and from the waist down, I was like, wow, this guy's feet are like
14.
Like this.
Yep.
His waist and everything. The reason he was knocking these people out, his punches started at his feet and went up through that trunk of his. And I was like, wow, thank God I never did anything like that. But initially it was one of the biggest honors that I could have, because for me to be with Mike and have some responsibility for his vulnerability, wow, like that was amazing honor and amazing responsibility.
He was out of shape then. He was super overweight when we first started.
Yes, he was. He wasn't feeling great about himself
at all.
And you met Master Cole, but one of the staple meditations that we were taught that you could do to help people, it's called the Great Invocation. And after workouts, Mike, he would want me to go, and we would go for walks. And honest to God, the stuff I would say to him is, you know what, Mike, you're gonna make it back. The world needs you, Mike. Like, you don't understand. Like, you represent masculinity for the world. Like, the world needs you, and you're strong. You can do these things. And I would tell him these things. But then, from the time I left till the time I got back, whenever it was quiet, I was doing the Great Invocation over this, because I wanted to see that guy back. I did not want to see another human being feel that way about themselves. A person who was such a positive influence on so many people's lives. Mike Tyson changed so many people's lives. He brought something out of people that was visceral. Like, there was a masculinity that was latent in some people, that he was able to bring out of them. So for me, to have some of the responsibility of being with him at a time of his vulnerability, wow, I mean, I couldn't, it was a great honor. It was a great honor for me. It was also a great frustration, because I know that if I could get Mike to do and buy in, like you said, to what I would want him to do, that there is no reason, even to this day, for him to have the physical limitations that he has. No reason whatsoever. It would take 6 months to a year, but the next 80 years, 90 years of his life, he would have a great quality of life, So it was an honor. What a beautiful, beautiful person. Like, when I think of Mike Tyson now, I think of, like, when I was a little kid, I remember seeing the little robin birds in the nest, and the mother, like, that vulnerability, that softness, that sweet, that just pure innocence. When I think of Mike, that's
No, it's
the Mike
beautiful.
Tyson that I think of. You know, like I don't. It's a different. Obviously, I respect him as an athlete, what he was able to do, the way he trained, his intensity level, his focus. You know, when he was with Cuss, it was. I've not seen a person, maybe Lance Armstrong or somebody like that, like, you know, somebody really elite like a Tom Brady, whatever. Some people like that are really can tap into that. But yeah, it was a great honor.
Last one is this. Listen, you up on the bike early on, watching people at Gults. I watch you, and I watch you come in with a smile. You say hi to everybody. But the one person that you made great impact with me on, and you might surprise you, this black kid from Long Beach, hockey player, who took 3 buses to get to train with you in the morning. And you treated him like he was the MVP of the Kings.
Yeah, Emerson Edom was his name.
Emerson, yeah.
Yeah, he was a special kid. Mixed family. His dad was white, mom was black. And obviously in some ways I saw a lot of me in him. And what he would do, he lived in Long Beach, and he was coming to me at the age of 14.
Right.
And so he would get a ride or rollerblade to catch a train.
Right.
The train would take him to El Segundo, and I would have Rob Blake or some of the guys who were at the Kings at the time pick him up at the train station and bring him to the workout. And sometimes when he couldn't do that, he would then take a bus from El Segundo to Lincoln, and then he would rollerblade or walk or run from Lincoln to the gym. Right. And he did that from the age of 14 till he was probably 17 or,
right.
You know, and he ended up becoming a first-round draft pick by the Ducks. So it was amazing process to see him go from that kid that had that desire. But again, had I not had my experiences,
exactly,
I was able to tap into something in me to be able to help him to get to that point, you know.
Watching you train him was like watching you train your young self. It was power. I knew what was going on. It was very powerful, brother. You gave that kid a lot of love and also firmness.
Yeah.
You let him know what's right, because you're like me.
Yeah.
If you don't want to do it, it's okay.
Yeah.
We're cool. Do your thing, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you want to be here at 5 in the morning. We're going to get down.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, that's the subconscious, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not him. It's something that was put into him that he wasn't taught was put into him, like it is for every other human being walking around. Where it came from, what it consists of, and how much it controls your life. And so I never, in my firmness was to the subconscious. My compassion was always to him, right? So, but there are times, you know, that's the position people are putting me into.
Yeah.
They're putting me in a position to get them to do something that they wouldn't do on their own.
Exactly. Amen. Any final thoughts for our audience, brother?
I just hope that people understand that this whole concept of the subconscious, especially in a lot of the people that you've helped, because they don't understand that voice, where it comes from, and that it's not their fault, how much control over them it has, that they can overcome it. I mean, it takes work, but once you know something is there, it makes it somewhat easier to learn how to gain control over it. And they need to trust you. And unlike many other podcasts, the only reason you're trying to do this podcast is because you're trying to talk to people's subconscious and get their hearts to be the dominant voice that's in their head. And once that happens, I mean, humanity, there's nothing, you know, like all this Republican, Democrat, Russian, American, all that goes. It's all gone. We're all one. We're all one. And when you see somebody that needs help, you open your hand, and you don't see them as anything other than your brother, your sister. That's what your podcast is about. And that's why I wanted to do it. That's why I agreed to do it, because that's who you are as a human being.
Oh man,
And
thank
I'm
you.
grateful for you.
Wow, that was really sweet. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're sweet.
That's very kind of you. Fuck, dude. Thank you. I was gonna say thank you for being my friend and teacher and making me a better human being.
Yeah, now I'll start doing my workout.
That's great. Wow, TR. Jesus, bro. The Seano Show is a production of iHeart Podcasts, hosted by me, Seano McFarlane, produced by Pod People and 28th Ave. Our lead producer is Keith Karlek. Our executive producer is Lindsay Hoffman. Marketing lead is Ashley Weaver. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.